Philip, you have by 20 minutes for your presentation, and then after that, uh, chairman of our committee, chair of our committee, and I gonna have gonna throw you some questions.
Okay, thank you. So I will start. Honorable committee members, welcome to my dissertation defense. The topic of my research is factors influencing Moscow students university level of trust in the Russian state mainstream media news. And I would like to tell you why it's relevant to my studies at NIDA. According to OECD, trust influences the relationship between citizens and government, and in turn has an impact on the outcomes of public policy. So on this picture, you can see yellow vests in Paris. They didn't like government policy, and they started protests. Same situation occurred in Thailand, in Hong Kong, and in Russia, and in the US. So we can represent this in the following graph. For example, government has some policy. It will announce it through some messages, and then they usually go through government medium, for example, TV, radio, newspapers. But today we have independent mediums, for example, internet, social networks, and then these policy messages reach public minds, and public decides to trust it or not to trust it. And then there's a feedback. They can reject the policy if they distrust the government message, or they can accept it. Um, and then if they reject, they may even go to the streets like it happened in Paris. So it's very important for the government to have trust in its message. In Russia, I would like to inform you, in Russia, government owns or controls all media except internet, social media. And on the internet and social media, government has to compete with many opinion leaders. And young people in Russia predominantly get information from the internet, social networks in particular. So we can represent social networks like that. We have virtual opinion leaders that receive information, digest it, and then spread to their followers. And this information, the presentation of this information is different, of course, from the TV, where everything is wonderful. But opinion leaders, virtual opinion leaders, might have a critical outlook on the situation. The research questions for my dissertation were, do students trust the information they get from MSM? What factors weaken the level of students' trust or increase the level of distrust? And what could be the most appropriate government policy to regain the trust of the young people to the policies by the government? These are the research questions, and objectives are similar. Very important to ask the question, what is trust? According to the literature review, we found out that trust is the willingness of a party to be vulnerable to the actions of another party, based on the expectation that the other party will perform a particular action important to the truster, irrespective of the ability to monitor or control that other party. So, for example, in Russia, government said we will raise the pension age. And so the public has to trust that the government has the best interest of the people when they're making such a decision. Trust, there are two elements, there are two types of trust. There's interpersonal trust, trust between two people, trust between friends, and there's systemic trust, institutional trust, whether when you decide to trust or not to trust an institution, government, media, etc. So when it comes to media trust, there are 5 elements, again, according to the literature review. Is media unbiased? Is media accurate? Is it presenting all points of view? Is it performing the watchdog function, fighting against corruption, exposing problems? Is it manipulating us or not? So, based on this, you could have low trust, no trust, or high trust in media. And also, trust antecedents are trustworthiness. So, if someone is trustworthy, then they will have your trust. So, in our research, trust is the dependent variable, and antecedent trustworthiness is the independent variable that is influencing the dependent variable. And in our research, we also equated trustworthiness to social capital. It's a very interesting phenomenon, social capital. Social capital is the capital to influence other people, gaining trust of other people. Government could have financial capital, resources, but very important to have social capital, capital to be able to influence the people through trust and not through police force. Again, according to the OECD, they created a model which I used in my work. Social capital has two elements, competence and values. And they, in fact, are made up of responsiveness, reliability, competence, and values are integrity, openness, fairness, and transparency. So, for example, if I think that my government is not transparent, then I will evaluate the values to be low. Therefore, the overall social capital will fall down, and I will not consider government to be trustworthy. Therefore, I will not trust it. So, in this research, we hypothesized that if the source or the medium of the message is trustworthy, the message will be trusted. And we equated trustworthiness with social capital, capital to influence others, in the absence of other influences. So here we have independent variable and dependent variable. Government, social capital, positive, then people will trust the media. Mainstream media has social capital, people will trust the media. But at the same time, if people are relying on alternative internet media, then it will decrease the public trust in the mainstream media. There could be other influences that we will discuss a bit later that could alter the relationship. This also, through the literature review, we uncovered that there's such a thing as propensity to trust. We are all born different, we all have different experiences, therefore we all have different levels of trust to strangers, just maybe it's the genes, many elements. So it could be the environment that where we live. For example, in Russia there were many revolutions, wars, crises, so people tend to trust government less because of their past experiences. Maybe it's your genes, maybe other factors. According to the model by Rothenberg, propensity to trust is made up of reliability, emotion, and honesty. And also, if I'm an honest person, perhaps I think that others are honest as well, and vice versa. If I'm dishonest, then I will project this to others. So there's three elements. So coming back to our model, propensity to trust is a filter that public has. So the messages also go through a personal filter. And some people, even though the government is honest, they still don't trust it because of the personal filter. So in our research, propensity to trust was a moderator that was influencing the relationship between independent variable and dependent variable. And this could be enhancing the relationship, buffering, therefore meaning decreasing, or no relationship at all. In our research, we also had a control variable. Personal negative experience with the government. Control variable should be held constant in a research. It's a variable, it's not of interest to the study, but is controlled because it could influence other elements. So if you were lied by the media previously, or you were treated badly by the government, you tend to remember negative experiences more than positive, and it could also affect your attitude towards the government. So it was a control variable. Therefore, we created a conceptual framework with independent variables and dependent variable. Dependent variable, level of trust in mainstream media news. Then social capital of the government, social capital of the mainstream media, that is sending the messages that the government has. Also, social capital of alternative internet media. We also had control variable, experience with media, negative experience with media and government, and propensity to trust that would influence social capital of government and mainstream media news. Overall, 12 hypotheses in the study. Methods. We created 101 questions that were measuring demographic information of the respondents, control variable, then trust in the mainstream media news, dependent variable, social capital of government, MSM, and alternative internet media, and moderating values propensity to trust. We used a 7-point Likert scale, 1 being strongly disagree, 7 being strongly agree. And we distributed it to 10 universities in Moscow, covering 401 students, so 40 students per university, various majors. During last year, during orientation week, my people approached different majors and asked students who were willing, and there were 40 students per university, and then they were answering questions on their mobile devices. So they would scan the QR code and see my questions and answer questions. Some students didn't answer questions completely, so we maybe 100 responses were discarded. So we only have 401. And this 401, it represents the population of Moscow students, which is 610,000 people. Foreign students were not covered, only undergraduate students who were born in Moscow or are studying in Moscow but are from other provinces. So demographics, 56% male, 43% female, 27% come from poor households. That's what they reported. 16% spend 10 hours a day online. 71% said they don't spend time watching conventional TV sets, but they could watch maybe TV online. They get news from social networks. They're spending time online. So, for example, how often do you use the internet? Male and female, as you can see, more or less the same information. We were not focusing on age because they are all undergraduate students. Our data is reliable because alpha Cronbach between 0.8 and 0.9, which is desirable for social sciences. This is correlation and regression results. We can see that there is, as we predicted, positive correlation between government and MSM social capital and trust, dependent variable, and negative correlation between social capital of alternative internet media and trust. So if people are trusting alternative internet media, they will trust mainstream media less. If they think that government has high competence, then they will trust the mainstream media news. This is a summary of descriptive statistics for the variables with minimum, mean, and maximum values. So, for example, we can see that government competence, this is minimum, and this is maximum and mean, and this is alternative internet media values. So we can see that alternative internet media values are higher than the values for the mainstream media news. We also answered the question of our research. It turns out that 85% of respondents distrust mainstream media based on their answers, and only 7% trust, and 7% neither trust nor distrust. We had the moderating variable propensity to trust, and it turns out that propensity to trust, if it's changed, it doesn't affect high mainstream media values. Therefore, we realize that values are important. Even the propensity to trust cannot alter the high values. This is an interesting finding. So we had 12 hypotheses. 10 of them turned out to be the same as we predicted, but 2 are different. For example, alternative internet media values turned out to be not really significant. So there needs to be more studies to find out, what is happening with that. And also, there's as I just told you, hypothesis 12. The high values of mainstream media news are not affected by the propensity to trust if it's changed. Therefore, we came up with a revised model of trust. We now hypothesize that perhaps alternative internet media, because it's prevalent and it's everywhere with us in the pockets, students are constantly immersed in the social networks, perhaps it's changing people, and they will unconditionally distrust mainstream media and unconditionally trust alternative internet media. And then, of course, then we have a phenomenon of fake news, because people trust the media because it's coming from their friends. So it's perhaps the relationship is like that. So alternative internet media is influencing propensity to trust. So nurture is dominating nature. This is what we are hypothesizing. And we conducted, we looked at the correlation, and there's correlation between alternative internet media and propensity to trust. So there is some relationship, and further studies could go deeper into this scenario. Therefore, in our study we demonstrated that social capital has values and competencies, and also a strong competitor could change the situation, the reaction between dependent and independent variables. Lower levels of values of the Russian government lower the overall trust in the mainstream media news. Alternative media, they have higher values and they draw more people, and propensity to trust also has an influence. The theoretic implication of my research is I used the Weber's theory of bureaucratic organization, communication theory, and social capital, and put it all together in one research. So, for example, uh, before there was hierarchy. TV was sending the messages. Today there are many social networks that are sending us the message. So there's a sender, receiver, and there's noise. So previously, authority through TV was telling people what to think, and it was only through the propensity to trust that people were either accepting or not accepting the situation, trusting or not trusting the messages. Today, there are many sources of information, and values are very important because values influence trustworthiness. So if we receive information from a channel, but we think that the channel or the messenger or the source has no values, we will not trust the information coming from there. And it's very important because today Russian government is working a lot on competence and it forgets about the values. So if politicians don't have integrity, if media people don't have transparency or fairness, it will weaken their overall social capital, weaken the trustworthiness, and people will not trust the information coming from that source or that medium. Therefore, if government wants to prevent social instability and wants people to accept its policies and trust, they need to uh, focus on this situation because our research indicated that the values of government, Russian government, and the values of Russian mainstream media were low. So this is the finding.